With me today is Mary Howell. She's here to talk about her book, Tips for Teachers, What You Didn't Learn in College About the Classroom. What prompted you to write this book, Mary?
One of my goals when I retired from education was to write a book. And so that I accomplished that goal. But what I found out was when I worked in central office and I was recruiting teachers and hiring them, they would come in and some would quit the first day, the first hour, the first month. And I started keeping a list of some of the issues and the problems that they had. And I said when I retired, I would put all that together in a handy reference book so that teachers could be successful.
I take it you think you don't learn a great deal about actually teaching when you're in college.
Well, you get all the book knowledge. You have all the book knowledge, but the common sense and the things that you need to do in the classroom, that's on the job training. You can plan a good day, but when you get in there and you interact with the children, everything changes.
Well, you've got children, you've got parents, you've got your principal, and as you said, the central office, and they all have their own ideas about it.
Or their own agenda. And what happens is teachers have to shuffle that in between actually teaching the students on what to do. And there's so much paperwork involved that they become frustrated. So what I did is try to make a little small checklist of handy things to do that you could just pick the book up, look at it, and you could be successful.
And these checklists are included in the book. There are actually quite a few of them in here. So now you said you observed what happened when it went wrong for other teachers, but I'm betting that some of the information in here is things that you picked up when you were a teacher.
I did. When I was a classroom teacher, structure, environment, and I always had three famous words, firm, fair, and consistent. And I think if you apply those, you can teach anyone. But not only that, when I was a principal, I would have so many teachers that were having problems. I mean, they couldn't control the class, or either they didn't understand the materials, and then they couldn't get the information to the students. So a lot of that in the checklist is just simple things that you can do to be successful in the classroom.
And this applies to whatever subject you're teaching.
Okay. This is not only for teachers in the educational arena, but people who work with children at churches, daycares, anyone that's working with a group of people, whether they be small children or adults, there has to be some structure in that environment. There has to be procedures, and this book will help anyone to be successful.
I'm thinking of some adult committees I've been involved in that could use a little structure, actually.
I know it. But also in the back of the book, you'll see some blank pages, because what I found is teachers will write things down on paper and lose it. So in the back of the book, I put blank sheets so they could keep everything together so that they could be successful in whatever they're working on.
And this is not a huge college textbook.
No,
it's something that people can run through fairly quickly.
Well, it's small, but it's also a handy little reference book. And in the front of the book, a lot of times in college, they don't tell you how important the secretary is. They don't tell you about the cook. And they don't tell you about the custodian, because they can make your life miserable if you don't appreciate those individuals. So what I've done is I put some narrative in there, but I've also put a checklist format so that they could just read it and work and still be successful.
Well, it sounds like a real recipe for success for people, especially, as you said, with the checklist. Once you've read it through, then that is kind of the reminder of the important aspects of that.
Right. Well, I've found that most of the teachers that I've worked with, even at central office, their problems were either discipline or classroom management. And what I've tried to do is just give them some tips that they can look at and try to be successful. But sometimes you have to have that reinforcement. So that's why the book is a small, handy reference book, is that sometimes they need that to look at, and then once they look at it, they can get back on track rather than trying to read a thick narrative or whatever.
Now, does it have tips on dealing, you've mentioned the cook and the custodian, but you've also got to deal with your principal.
The principal, parents, and what to do if the principal, perhaps sometimes teachers don't get along with their principals. So there are some tips there in what you need to do in working with the principals. But I also found that teachers sometimes are intimidated by the principals in their building. So I've tried to provide some tips so that they could develop a relationship with the principal before it's time for them to be evaluated. I think that's important.
I think that is vitally important if you want to keep your job.
Right, right. So that's some of the tips that are in there, because evaluation is critical, and I've tried to provide them with things to do ahead of time, so that when they come in to evaluate you, you can be successful.
Now, do you think this book would help somebody other than teachers?
Yes, yes. The checklist will help anyone that's working in the environment with other people or trying to teach people to do certain things. For instance, people don't understand that when people come into a classroom or just any type of meeting, they need to be organized, they need to be prepared, they need to have everything in place for the meeting or whatever to take place. And it's little tips like that that will help them to be successful in that arena.
So it sounds like anybody who's dealing with people
Right, right.
could use this
Yes,
book.
children, adults, teenagers, whatever, in any environment.
Now, obviously, it is the point of this is for teachers who don't have much experience. But do you think teachers who've been working for a number of years can learn something?
Well, and I did put information in my book about that. I think people who've been working for a number of years, sometimes they need to be refreshed. Sometimes they need to reevaluate where they are and do some reflection on how successful their experiences are. But also, it's for the first-year teacher who has not a clue about the classroom. They're ready, they've received a job, and now they're ready to work.
And that's entirely different than the trial run that you get when you're in school.
Well, not only that, your intern teaching or your student teaching is so different because you have another teacher there with you all the time. And if you're doing something that's not quite right, they can give you immediate feedback. But when you have that classroom by yourself, it's totally different.
I can imagine that could be very scary.
It's intimidating. It's intimidating when you have all those students coming into the classroom. Yes.
And now this applies for kindergarten teachers, high school teachers
Yes, yes.
as well.
Yes.
So.
It's for anyone in any age. What you do is there are basic skills and basic things that you do in a classroom. Like you check roll, you do grading, and it's information on that. It's just how easy you make your task. There are some teachers who spend so much time just going through and saying, manually calling names. So I've given them some guidelines for saving time in the classroom.
Well, it sounds like a great book.
It is.
And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us about it.
Thank you for interviewing me.
Mary Howell has been here talking about tips for teachers. You can find it at your library and your favorite bookstore.